York Times best-selling author and CEO of TDJ Enterprises. On top of that, he has two new films on Lifetime that explore two of the seven deadly sins. One's on lust and the other on envy. I had the opportunity to speak to him about the films, as well as dealing with temptation, the notorious Derrick Jaxson cheating scandal, and what our country needs to do to heal from racism. Take a look. Well, it is a pleasure and a blessing to speak with you. We know you are a friend of the company and a friend of the brand, and I'm honored to, finally get my turn to speak with you today.
I'm thrilled to speak with you, and you're right. I've got a long-standing relationship with Black Enterprise, and it's good to get a chance to talk to you all again.
Absolutely. So, phenomenal job with these two movies. What message would you say you want viewers to walk away with after viewing these films?
People in this world often love to talk about what each other did, but they never talk about why. And what we tried to do was, rather than to be preachy and complain about the what, but to set it up in such a way that you could see why a person would be envious and where they came from and what they've been through and what led them to make good or bad choices. And then weigh it against your own life in areas where you can learn something from them. It's a cautionary tale, but it does really want to explore the why, because it's hard to hate somebody you understand. And so we really labored really hard to make the characters understandable and believable and relatable, and to understand that we are a very complex species, and nobody just jumps up and jumps off rail for the fun of it. There's always something that led them to the edge. And so I like to play around with character development and that sort of thing. So I think this film has benefited from that.
Absolutely. And, I love the themes of the films. What makes lust and envy so dangerous, especially in relationships?
Anytime we are driven to action beyond our core values, we compromise who we are. And there are 7 deadly sins. We got 2 greenlit. I want to deal with the other 5 too, but these have to be successful enough to get to the other 5. This will now be 3 films that I have done with Lifetime. Faith Under Fire was the first one. Now we've got 2 more. Hopefully we'll have 5 more. And we'll have a view of all of the many struggles and the complexities and the mental health, the mental health that's behind some of the activities that goes on. And especially during the pandemic, I think we've seen a resurgence of violence and inappropriate behavior, domestic violence, murder rates are up, people are in a pressure cooker. And we don't want to justify when people go off the rail, but we do want to understand so that we can better determine in our own lives when we're getting too close to the edge.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy that you personalize it, because we all do deal with these, the 7 deadly sins and these emotions, especially lust and envy. I feel like they're very human characteristics. What advice would you give believers and even non-believers about fighting these temptations and not letting them overtake us?
Lust is for a moment. Life is for a lifetime. And you don't want something for a moment to destroy your life. So that's for anybody, regardless of your belief system. Envy is to assume that the grass is always greener because the house is bigger. And that's not always true either. You can be miserable in a big house and you can be miserable living in a trailer. And so a lot of times we are bitter because we think we didn't get something that everybody else got, when in fact, sometimes the people that we're envious of are not any more happy than we are. And I think the film does a good job of showing that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And when you think that and you want to take that from somebody, it destroys the possibility of you getting there yourself. And it's a negative faith thing, because in order for you to envy me, that means you've given up on being you. And I hope that that comes through in the movie. I hope that it makes people think a little bit. And we tried to be thoughtful without being preachy.
Oh, absolutely. And to the first point you made about lust, that definitely comes through very much so, as we're following the lead character played by Carrie Hilson, and how it just seemed like it just came out of nowhere. And I feel like that happens to us in real life all the time. Like, we're trying to live our lives, and then all of a sudden we feel some type of temptation, and it's a conflict that we have within ourselves. Which path are we going to choose?
Yes, yes. And those choices determine the outcome of the rest of our lives. Sometimes you don't get a second chance. Sometimes I'm sorry is not enough. And it's just making us aware, all of us, because nobody is beyond this temptation, but all of us need to be reminded continually, because we do have unscheduled opportunities that we didn't plan, where we encounter things that can derail us from our goals and our dreams, and actually from, as the character really portrays, from the things that are most important to us. We can easily destroy them going after a feeling for a moment.
Mm. What advice would you give for those of us who are dealing with envy, but on the other side, maybe feeling some type of jealousy or envy from a loved one or someone who's very close?
I think that you have to work hard to disarm them, to include them if they're close to you, to let them know that you still care about them, to spend time with them. Anytime people feel included, well, I won't say you never, but you seldom blow up a building that you live in. And so, if you make room for them, if you invite them in, if you show interest in their lives, if you show that you're still connected to them in some way, I think it helps to diffuse that. It's hard for family members to accept that one excelled and the other one didn't, because people are always comparing you with each other. And those comparisons tempt you to be envious, not so much of what the other person has, but for the acceptance of the people who criticize you, who say, why aren't you there? When in fact, your there might not be my there. I may not want out of life what you want. The presumption that everybody wants a boat isn't true any more than everybody wants a big car. People want different things and they value different things in life. And yet, many times, because they're taunted by outsiders, it can split the families apart, put sisters at war with each other, put brothers at war with each other, tear up an entire family simply because people make unfair comparisons.
Mm. Powerful word. Thank you so much for sharing that. I did want to just dig a little bit deeper into lust and temptation. Again, one of the themes of your films, because many in both the Black community and the Black church have been outraged over Christian relationship expert Derrick Jaxson's cheating scandal. I don't know how closely you've been following it, but what advice would you give those who are building a brand that embodies Christian values while ultimately living a lie?
Wow, what a question. One of the other has to be corrected. I won't speak about him directly because I don't know him, but just in general, one of the other has to be corrected. We're always correcting ourselves, and we're always trying to find authentic leadership. It isn't so much the fact that we fall short, because we all fall short. I think it's how we handle it when we do, and our authenticity about it, and our humility. We're pretty forgiving as a people when we believe that you're authentic. And so my advice is to avoid that as much as possible. But if you fall into that, to be just as authentic and sincere as you possibly can be, and move forward as best you can with what is the bigger priority, which ought to be your family. How do I get this back on track again with my family? It's not about my audience, it's about my family. And sometimes God forces us to have to reevaluate what matters the most to us, public opinion or the opinion of our own children, those kinds of things.
So do you ever feel like sometimes people who, purport to be Christians, and when they have public falls or scandals, it kind of makes it look so bad on the Christian church in general, the Black church? Like, I know I personally feel like that. I'm just like, because I'm rooting for everybody, especially, those of faith and our faith leaders. And then when you have stuff that happens like this, I kind of feel like it's a negative reflection.
It is a negative reflection, but here's a quick story. I went to one of my members' graduation who was getting a doctorate degree, and every person of color who walked across that stage, my chest swelled up with pride. And then I got in my car and I thought, I wonder, do white people have that same reaction when white people walk across the stage? And they don't. They don't have that same reaction. I think we're always trying to prove that we're okay, that that we have value, that we have worth. Scandals happen amongst all people, but we're always working from the deficit of trying to prove that we are good enough. And I think that's the real culprit, getting down to that. To lay on any one person our faith and our hope and our identity is too much weight for any one person to carry. The only person perfect is Christ. And I think we need to adjust our message and our followers to the reality that we are human and we are flawed, and we are learning together, rather than that we're superior. We shouldn't carry the mantle as if we are superior, and then the expectations wouldn't be so daunting. And then the public has to realize that every time we do well, we don't have to use it to prove that the whole race is validated, no more than every time we do wrong, that now we have all somehow been diminished by the activities of one individual. And by the way, scandals happen in every profession: athletes, politicians, every walk of life. And the fall is just as hard, just as painful, and often just as public in the world we live in today, for everybody. But I'm a bit like you. I do draw up and wince a little bit because I want us to win all the time. And I do wrestle with the fact that we are all judged by one, and crucified by masses. And so when anybody falls, it splashes on everybody.
Yeah, I think so in my church. We try to aim to make God look good. But thank you so much, Bishop, for just breaking that down. That was very insightful. And as we begin to wrap up, the last thing I want to talk about is just the Derrick Chauvin trial, murder trial. As we know, he murdered George Floyd. This country has so much more work to do when it comes to healing and racism. What is your advice for that healing, and what role does the church play?
I think we have to keep talking. As painful and as horrific as George Floyd's murder was, and even watching the trial is hard to watch and relive that again. Those images are so painful to me personally, that it's hard to watch. I think that we have to keep talking to people who don't see things the way that we do, so that we are better understood. Again, it's hard to hate somebody you understand. And I think the hardest thing to do is to keep talking and not draw up and react violently and end up in a civil war. I'm very worried because it's hard not to be emotional about something that affects all of us. We've been pulled over. My kids have been pulled over. I know what it is to be pulled over and be worried. I'm a Black man in America. I identify with the pain in a very graphic way, but we've got to figure out how to live together in a more perfect union in this country that doesn't castigate Black people or Asian people or any people. We don't have to agree with each other to give each other the space to live and the dignity of being a human being. And I'm watching the trial with bated breath in hopes that maybe we've taken a step forward. I need to see some sign of progress, that the overall system has evolved, because so many sacrificial lambs have been slain on the altar of our ignorance. And I think that enough is enough. How many more people have to die for us to look at our system and say that our system is not fair and equitable to all people?
Thank you so much, Bishop. Appreciate your time today. Appreciate the work you're doing and the films.
Thank you. Thank you very much.